This lens has a unique combination of features that is rarely seen in lenses. To start with, it is an anamorphic lens. That means it's going to stretch your footage and you're going to get that widescreen look like you typically see in Hollywood movies. And this particular lens is a 1.5 times anamorphic. But it is also a macro lens. And there's plenty of macro lenses out there and there's plenty of anamorphic lenses out there, but there aren't many anamorphic macro lenses, which is what this lens is all about. Now, first of all, I want to say that this is a budget lens, but it is a budget lens by high-end cinema and Hollywood type standards, where a similar lens might cost you $25,000 or $35,000. But it is not really a budget lens by normal people standards. I also want to disclose that this lens was sent out to me to allow me to make this video, but I haven't been paid anything by the company and they haven't had any say in the making of the video. I'll also put some links in the description down below to the best prices I could find on the lens. Once again, it's not a budget lens by any means, but it is a budget lens by Hollywood standards. This is the 60mm T2.9 Anamorphic Macro lens by Laowa. Now, this is part of their anamorphic range, but I think you could use it and mix it with other anamorphic lenses just because of the special properties that this lens has. Beyond that, it is a Super 35 lens, but you can get a 1.4x full frame expander, which allows you to use it on full frame. And that's going to give you a lens that is similar to a 60mm T4 in full frame terms. And I understand that the optics hold up pretty well, but I haven't had the full frame expander to actually test that functionality. Now, the lens itself, even though it's called a nanomorph and it's part of their nanomorph range, if you look at it, it's not small or nano by any means. It is quite large. It is a really well-built lens, and it does have a really nice feel to it. It comes in PL mount, but in the box, you actually get an EF bayonet, which you can change over. So this is not an adapter. This is actually a changeable lens mount. So you can take the whole rear mount off the camera and put EF on it. In addition to that, they also have optional RF, E, Z, and L mount bayonets. So you're changing the whole lens to that lens mount, and those are only an extra $50, which I think is a pretty cool function. And I hope we see that on more lenses. I love that idea. So no matter which lens mount you've got, you can pretty much turn this lens into a native mount for that camera. Now, the build is really good. As I said, it has a really nice, well-dampened aperture ring, and it has a really well-dampened focus ring. And I think the stiffness or the resistance on this is just about perfect for my taste. A lot of times these cine lenses have this either super stiff or super loose. I think this is perfect somewhere in the middle. The other thing is it's got a 77mm filter thread at the front. And if you look at the back with this PL mount, the PL mount part of the camera or the lens doesn't stick deeply into what might be a PL adapter if you're using a mirrorless camera. And a lot of people like to use these drop-in filter systems. And this lens should work well with most filter systems because it isn't super deep. One thing that was a little bit challenging about this lens was the short focus throw from 1 meter to infinity. Now, all the footage in this video was focused by hand, and we did manage to hit focus, but at times it was a little bit challenging because of this short focus throw. The lens also comes in 3 different flare options: amber, blue, and silver. I selected the amber flare, which I think is just a little bit more neutral, but this is all completely personal preference. Looking at the optical performance and starting with sharpness, right from T2.9, you already have a very sharp image. And I think this is important because a lot of budget anamorphic lenses out there at T2.9 are not very sharp. As you stop the lens down, it does get a little bit sharper, and T4 is slightly sharper than T2.9, and then T5.6 is just a little bit sharper again, but all of them are plenty sharp enough, and you wouldn't pick your iris setting based on the sharpness. Looking at bokeh and background blur, right from T2.9, you have very smooth and pleasing out of focus areas, and you have oval shaped bokeh. As you stop it down to T4 and T5.6, the bokeh remains oval. This is at traditional viewing distances, that is non-macro distance. As we get into the macro, if you are open all the way up to T2.9, you do get some unusual shapes in the bokeh, but this goes away as soon as you stop it down to T4, and the bokeh remains nice and oval. And I also notice we get a slight, what they call waterfall bokeh effect once we get to the edges of frame. This is kind of like an anamorphic lenses version of swirly bokeh. Focus breathing is extremely well controlled, even going from the minimum focus distance to normal viewing distances. There is a slight punch in, but when we're using it at normal distances, there is effectively no zooming or no focus breathing at all. The lens exhibits pretty much perfect anamorphic flare. At least for me, what you'll see is it is there, but it is not overpowering. I chose the amber flare version, but there is also a silver flare and a blue flare version. You'll notice some heavy vignette in these shots, and I think that's because we left the camera in full frame mode instead of shooting in Super 35 mode. The lens also held its contrast reasonably well, but in some situations where you have a significant bright source of light blasting straight at the lens, you can get heavy desaturation, veiling, and washing out of the image. For an anamorphic lens, the distortion performance is pretty clinical, not showing significant barrel distortion or pincushion distortion. If I would have to say it has one, it is just the slightest amount of pincushion distortion, and that's once you get to the very edge of frame. But it is almost perfectly corrected. I think this is kind of an unusual performance for an anamorphic lens like this. Once again, distortion is really personal preference, but you're going to get a pretty neutral look here with really very little distortion to worry about. Both lateral and longitudinal chromatic aberration are very well controlled. This is something you might be able to pick on a test chart, particularly at minimum focus distances, but in real world results in all my shooting, I couldn't see any. Just on the test chart at times, you could see a slight change in color cast before and after the plane of focus. I thought I might get some questions about what the coverage looks like on full frame, so here's an example in open gate and a second one in full frame 16:9. The lens has a minimum focus distance of 24 centimeters, which is 9.5 inches, and it has a maximum magnification of 0.5 times. This is an extreme performance for a cine lens, and it means that the projection on the sensor is going to be about half the size that they are in real life. This is obviously a lens that can be used for more than just macro work. It's still a standard 60mm Super 35 cine lens, and it works well, and the images are excellent. It has beautiful out of focus areas, and it has excellent bokeh and background blur. It's sharp at T2.9, and there's a lot of versatility to a lens like this. But its superpower is definitely its macro abilities, and those macro abilities are not coming for free because you are paying for them in two different ways. One is the price. This lens is significantly more expensive than other nanomorph lenses because it has this macro ability. It's also significantly heavier, and there's nothing really nano about this lens at all. It is more the size of a standard cinema lens. But if you have the nanomorph set already and you want the macro capabilities, I think this lens is kind of a no-brainer. Or if you just have another cinema lens set or a video project that you need this close focus or 2:1 magnification, I think this lens will mix really well with other cine lenses. I think this is a lens that most people are going to know if they need or not. If you're regularly shooting anamorphic projects and want to capture dramatic close focus images that will add a level of richness and detail to your footage, then I think this lens is kind of a no-brainer. I also think the lens itself is neutral enough that you could mix it with 1.3x and all the way up to 2x anamorphics. And even if you're shooting in a full frame or larger sensor, for those specific shots, you could use this lens, drop down to Super 35 mode, and it would mix absolutely seamlessly. Laowa has just dropped a 9mm T5.6 rectilinear cine lens. This seems to be based on the same optics as their photography lens that I reviewed a little while back, and I've thrown that on screen now. If you're after a unique look for your video projects, just check out that video, but imagine the optics in a cine lens housing with a PL mount.